Okay, now that our construction phase is more or less complete, we're going to start introducing a kind of value organization. The primary way that we get to this level of organization is to look at two elements. One, the shadow shape, and the other, the light shape. Of course, there is a symbiosis in between these, but I also think it's helpful to kind of consider them separately in a way. Each one has its own shape identity. And in the lighting situation that we've chosen for this model study, we have emphasized especially that strong binary sense. So the world of this drawing is really divided into one or the other. The third element in this organization is going to be the halftone values. Halftone values essentially are going to be any indication of value inside the light shape that is there to indicate structure and form. They're the way that we give a sense of purpose and reality to the light shape. Now, the fact that we're organizing our drawing by considering these three separate visual phenomena is what actually offers us the opportunity to work even harder on our shape design. In the absence of good, clear shapes and contours, we're left with the kind of nebulous drawing that's very difficult to kind of grab a hold of and arrange to convey the essence of the subject we're trying to portray here. So then establishing these shapes really is only the beginning of the job. The subcutaneous anatomy that we studied in the initial stage of the drawing is now going to be put to the test when we add light and shadow to those very specifically arranged forms. Make no mistake, even though our block-in is finished, the amount of changes that we're going to make is only going to extend from here. The drawing in one way or another will be in a state of flux all the way until the final moments, which is really where we'll go to achieve our highest level of accuracy. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let's go back to that idea of shadow and light, and that dividing line in between the two. Your handling of this line technically in relationship to how you're handling the contours of the drawing should be just a little bit different. The contours, or the lines surrounding the body, should be of a relatively even quality until we come to the place where we create overlaps. As those lines enter the body, thus putting one form in front of the other, they dissipate slightly in their darkness and hardness. The shadow line then should be a kind of line apart from those. Increasing the width just a little bit, decreasing the value just a little bit, is usually enough to achieve this sense of difference, giving us the variety necessary to begin to perceive the drawing as more of a statement of visual phenomenon than a totally abstract schematic. The addition of value and the elaboration of value into this linear structure is what will get us closer to the visual impression, which will in turn give us a little bit better indication of the similarities and differences in between our drawing and our subject. This is a correlation that I feel is probably pretty interesting to talk about. That connection in between getting your drawing to appear similar in a way to your subject is not only an end in itself, but also a tool that you can use to notice differences. Heading into this phase of the drawing, really a lot of my consideration is just about making sure that while I step forward in terms of the value application, that I'm also making an improvement in the design sense that I'm indicating within the drawing. What I like to have happen is having a kind of stepped approach to the application of design complexity and value expression, so that every time I add a darker value to the shadow or to the halftones, I'm also increasing along with that the complexity of the shapes that I'm making. So everything that I'm doing is kind of speaking to the idea of moving from the broad to the more specific at a relatively even pace and in accordance with all of my other indications. The reason I bring this up is because I would really like to avoid ending up in a place where I have really highly developed values, so very dark values, and a fairly generic design, or alternatively, a very super specific design to the drawing that then I need to add values into. The application of values is almost always a process that will break up a little bit of the shapes that are underneath it. This relationship between design and value is a very sensitive one, and I think it is critical to allow a drawing to progress through its stages in the most harmonious way possible. For me, harmony is one of those features that is totally irreplaceable in a drawing. It is both a part of the goal, which is to say, the achievement of the final result, but also it plays a very big role in how we perceive the individual stages of a drawing. This is how I understand that adding things to a drawing must happen in a way that only adds to the sense of harmony rather than detracts from it. Finally, bringing this stage to a conclusion, our drawing is in a fairly typically perilous state. The influx of new information into the light shape and new value into the shadow has put an incredible burden of proof on the clarity and cleverness of the design of shapes that perhaps we have not yet had enough time to totally bring up to speed. It is a time where we need to proceed with calm and calculated attention, working toward clearly understood goals with an almost cold kind of passion. There are a few things that we need to make sure that we have achieved in this moment. First and foremost, we want to ensure that the drawing is more or less at one level or stage. We can see in the drawing that I am making now that the extremities, like the head and hands, are a little bit behind the level of design and value present in the torso. Not so much that it worries me, but enough that it bears mentioning. Second, we need to ensure that the gesture that we have chosen is consistently represented throughout the body. The tilt of the pelvis and the tilt of the shoulders, for instance, are such that we should find a stretched and elongated left-hand side of the torso and a compressed right-hand side of the torso. Our linear and value indications should confirm this fact. Now is the time to check that they do. Finally, in a stage of the drawing that is all about value, we need to ensure that our indications of value planes are consistent with the expected fall of light. When we look to the lightest planes, those that are facing most directly the light source, and we travel outward from the left to the right-hand side of the body, and from the top to the bottom of the body, we should find a relatively consistent value gradient. The more distant those planes are from the light source, the darker they become. And also, the less they are oriented towards the light source, the darker they become. Now that you've brought your drawing to this stage also, we are ready to press on and get into tighter rendering and even more specific shapes.